study. I mean, literally running.
You know what? I try to incorporate something that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, well, they're right. They're inspirational somehow, even though they make me realize how old I am.
No, I love that. I realize it's not something that's difficult to do because I did in youth that
Yeah. I think I'll go place for mom, and I think, oh, good. I don't know, they just make me happy.
I was saying this morning, on my calendar, I was supposed to be running right now. And I was like, oh well, I'm coming with this. So
Yeah.
I gotta pick up that road.
Yeah.
And you meet so many people.
Yeah.
You saw me.
Yeah, so it's, yeah, well, I think it's right.
Some of them think I'm crazy for running out of highways and shorts. And you know, a bomb car, I really like it all.
Yeah.
They appreciate it.
And this is a good time of year, not to cover the yet. That's the change. I mean, I don't have some, I realize there are some things. Oh, that's okay.
So what shirts look like there?
Just no, I'm here. Probably before they go to the schools. And I'm also, so it's about 500 miles ahead.
But now it's after. And it's strange to see them still
Yeah.
And you see the eyes that they feel respect.
Yeah, and it's great. An adversary that's out there expressing
How's that thing going over there?
oh, yeah, she always had
They would all cry. I mean, they would have to
good
say.
time for fundraising, staying busy.
But, anyway,
Got called, but it's
for a while, it was still doing takeout. The mission it's just good. I don't think he's still but anyways, it's great. And they said, I don't know. All of them. I'll read them. I never seen myself I'm sorry.
okay, but and you learning my it seems like it's not been really bad, so I'll advise you that and let you give your speech and questions. Thank you so much for coming. It's nice to shut your well, one of the things that got into all right, I'll do that. We'll meet on Sunday. It's mine. Yes, ma'am. Okay. All right. Good morning.
Morning.
We're gonna go ahead and get started. It looks like we still have a few people that are yet to come in, but I'm sure they'll continue to file in. So, I'm grateful to be here this morning, another day, and certainly grateful to have Ty Pinkins join us. As we discussed last week, while we were here meeting, we got word that our speaker for today was not going to be able to join us. And just so happens, I was sitting at my desk last week, and I got a message from a friend who said, I'd like to have Ty come and speak at the Friday Forum. And about that time is when Nicole and I realized that our backup had fallen through. So we are very, very fortunate to have Ty with us today, who's obviously a candidate for the United States Senate. Ty hails from Rolling Fork, Mississippi, a native son, military, went off to work in the Obama White House, and as he just described, saw fit to come home. So we're certainly glad to have someone of his caliber enter into the race. And without further ado, I'm going to have him introduce himself and talk a little bit about his platforms. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here today at Friday Forum at Refill, and I'll explain to you later why I'm so excited. But my name is Ty Pinkins. I am your Democratic nominee for the United States Senate. We'll be on the ballot November 5th of this year. Born and raised in Rolling Fork. I am a veteran, served 21 years on active duty, including 3 combat tours, Bronze Star. And for some strange reason, at the end of my military career, I decided to do this weird thing, go to law school. I attended the Georgetown University Law Center, where I earned my JD, as well as my LLM, my master's in law. And after that, I did what my wife thought was crazy, which is I sold my house and had herded my 2 kids up in my car, and I pointed myself south, and I came back to Mississippi, and I said, look, Mississippi is my home, this is where I'm going. And for the past few years, I have been working as a nonprofit public interest lawyer in some of the most underserved communities in our state, particularly in the Delta, Shelby County, Humphreys County, Washington County, Yazoo County, Essex County, all the way over by the Mississippi River, helping single mothers facing eviction in the middle of winter, in the middle of a pandemic, at the same time. That was going on when the COVID-19 crisis was happening. And I remember standing on the sidewalk in Greenville, and I was in the courtroom, and I was watching these cases go on where family members were coming in one after one, and people were being pushed out of their homes. And they were receiving these rulings against them from these landlords. The difference was in that room that there was a judge, there was maybe a single mom, or a mom and a father, and there was a landlord. The landlord had a lawyer. The low-income community member did not have a lawyer. 99% of the time, that low-income community member, that single mom or that family, was losing his or her case. And on the spot, the judge was telling them, in the middle of winter, in the middle of a pandemic, you have 10 days to get out of this house. It was heartbreaking. And so, as a lawyer, as a nonprofit lawyer sitting there, what I would do is I would beat the family out the door, because I couldn't really do what I needed to do in the courtroom. So I go outside the courtroom, and I had a document, a 1-page document. And a lot of times it's just a matter of having this simple information that you need that'll change your life. And it was a 1-page document. And the only thing that the family member needed to do was read one sentence and sign it and hand it to the landlord. That is it. And basically what it said was, because we were in the middle of a pandemic, and because we were going through a crisis as a country, that landlord could not kick that family out of their house. And so I beat them to the sidewalk, and I said, here you go. Read this, sign this, hand this to the landlord. And you could see the relief in those family members' eyes when they realized, this is somebody's here to help me. And that's what I was working on when I first became a lawyer and passed bar and started working in the city. One of the other cases that I worked on was protecting workers here in Mississippi.
particularly low-income farm workers across the state who have been cheated out of their pay by big businesses. This is what was happening. Farming, agriculture is extremely important in our state. It powers our economy. However, what a lot of business owners, particularly farm owners, were doing, they were inviting workers, foreign workers, to come to Mississippi to work on farms. That's okay. We need foreign workers. It's called the H-2A program. We need it because it's important to our economy. But you have to be honest when you're doing it. And you can't hurt Mississippi workers, which is what was happening. Because when you think of a foreign worker, you think of South America, Mexico, that's coming in to do the work, the seasonal work, and then they go back home. Well, in this instance, what was happening was farmers were, instead of bringing in those workers from South America, they were bringing in workers from South Africa to the United States. Now, in South Africa, there's different seasons, different crops, different equipment than workers have here in Mississippi. So they were inviting these South Africans, black South Africans, not white South Africans, to Mississippi, forcing local workers to train them on the seasons, the crops, and the equipment here. And you know what's coming next? They were displacing the Mississippi workers. But here's the thing that's most painful, and this is particularly why I decided to run for the United States Senate. When the farm owner would bring these white South Africans to Mississippi, he would force the local workers to train the South Africans. And while that was going on, the local worker would be getting paid $7.50 an hour, minimum wage. While the farm worker was getting trained, he would be getting paid $13, $14, $15, $16 an hour. Make that make sense. Make that make sense. So what I did was, I got on an airplane, and I flew to Washington, D.C., and I testified before Congress explaining to them how their federal policy, the H-2A program, was allowing Mississippians to be cheated out of their pay. The two senators sitting in Washington, Senator Wicker and Sidney Hyde-Smith, did one thing, and that is nothing. So I got back on the plane and I flew back to Mississippi when I was a member, when I was working at the Mississippi Center for Justice, phenomenal organization. And I came back to Mississippi and we sued those same businesses. And guess what? We won. We won. Put that over $1 million into the pockets of those low-income workers who have been cheated out of their pay. And that's when I decided that if you are not going to represent all Mississippians, you do not get to run unopposed to represent them in Washington, D.C. You do not get to do that. And as a veteran, it was, it's personal. It's extremely personal. I'm a proud son of the Mississippi Delta. Proud son of Mississippi. So I think we have to run for these positions in order to make sure that everybody is represented. So my platform, jobs in the economy, which is what I just explained, healthcare and education. Healthcare. For decades, and you all know this as well as I do, Mississippi has been either last or near last in healthcare. It's widely known we're the unhealthiest state in this country. We're near last in maternal mortality. We are absolutely last in infant mortality. You've seen the statistics, which means that when a woman gives birth in Mississippi, there's a higher likelihood that either she and or her baby will die in the subsequent 12 months, which is why it makes no sense to me that we still, not we, our leaders are still having a hard time understanding why it's important to expand Medicaid in our state. Now, I know that's a state issue where the governor and our legislator makes that decision. However, make no mistake, that Senate seat on the federal level also has implications. The only reason that we are able to have the opportunity to expand Medicaid on the state level is because that's made possible by the Affordable Care Act. And my opponent has been fighting tooth and nail along with his Republican counterparts to kill what? The Affordable Care Act. So this Senate seat has life and death consequences associated with it. And we see that a lot of our hospitals around the state are closing. Again, it makes no sense if the federal government is offering you $1 billion a year, $1 billion a year, and we know that that money is available to help keep rural hospitals open. Out of the 74 rural hospitals, over half of them are at risk of closing next week, 35. And we're sending $1 billion back to the federal government because we don't want to take a handout, I guess that's what they call it. But this is what confuses me. Every single month, Mississippians pay into the Medicaid system through your federal taxes. States all around us are expanding Medicaid using your tax dollars. Using your tax. So make this make sense to me. We have leaders in this state and on the federal level that are saying that they are willing to stand by while you fund Medicaid expansion for people that are not even living in Mississippi. However, they don't want you to benefit from your own tax dollars in your own state. That's not even algebra. That's basic second grade math. It does not make sense. Over the past decade, our state has sent back over $10 billion. The poorest state in the country has given back $10 billion to the federal government, all because of what I think is pride. Pride. While we watch mothers and babies struggle, we watch people die. Story down in Humphreys County, believe it or not, we have counties that don't even have medical facilities. Humphreys County does not have a hospital, does not have a short-term treatment facility. Does not exist. A young lady was 9 months pregnant a few years ago, and she started having complications, which she thought she was having complications. Stomach started hurting. In fact, she was going into labor. She got in her car, and she got on Highway 49, shooting straight through Humphreys County from Indianola to Yazoo on Jackson. She got about an hour out of Yazoo, hospital in Yazoo. She had to pull over because she could not take the pain anymore. She did not make it to Yazoo, nor did her baby make it to Yazoo. All because we have elected officials that want to refuse to accept help from the federal government. That is why I am running for the United States Senate. That's why I'm running. Education. You all have seen it. We have a group of people who are so afraid of our history. And don't get me wrong, Mississippi, we do have a painful history. That's a fact. But when we look at where we are right now, it's a beautiful thing. We have to embrace it. And the thing that's most personal to me when it comes to our state and our history is what people outside of our state think about us. They think we're more divided than we really are. When some of the issues we have going on in our state go on in other states as well. But the problem is we don't want to teach our children our past. And I disagree with that 100%. So I will fight for education, which includes making sure that our teachers are paid adequately, which is why I support legislation like the Pay Teachers Act. And this would say that states have to pay teachers a minimum salary of $60,000 a year. Depending on their experience, it would rise because we have to respect our teachers. It makes no sense that in our state, teachers who shape and mold some of our kids, shape and mold our kids that's going to take care of us in a few years, are eligible for food stamps. Teachers should not even, that should not happen. That is ridiculous. In the richest, the wealthiest country in the world, we haven't figured out how to pay our teachers what they deserve. And we hand them our children, our most valuable thing, the thing that's closest to us. We hand them our kids for 8 hours a day. Make that make sense. So that's why I'm on jobs in the economy, healthcare, and education. And I'm here today, and I said I was going to explain to you why I'm so excited. Because I get to talk to everyday Mississippians. And not only talk to them, our campaign motto is you talk, I listen, and we do. So I get to listen to everyday Mississippians. You may have heard I did this crazy thing. I started this crazy thing a few weeks ago. I'm a runner. I enjoy distance running. So I started an 800-mile advocacy run for women's reproductive freedoms, better jobs and a stronger economy, and healthcare. So we're running from South Haven, Mississippi, all the way to the coast. We're about 40 miles in now, and I feel good. But along those runs, what I'm doing is meeting everyday Mississippians in their communities, at their front doors, and giving them an opportunity to tell me what's important to them. And ask me questions, hard questions. Somebody asked me a very, very difficult question the other day. And politicians are afraid to face it. It was on the transgender issue, and I hope somebody asks me about it today. Because we have to answer those questions. And more importantly, what we have to do, if we can't answer the question, tell people I don't have the answer to the question. How hard is that? That is not difficult. Because what I fundamentally believe is voters, Mississippians, Americans, they want someone who is willing to just be honest with them about where they stand. And one of my frustrations is we have politicians who do the same thing every 4 years. They face a difficult question, whether that be access to abortion, the LGBTQ plus issue. They'll plant their feet and they'll straddle a fence. And they'll tell somebody over here on Jackson Street one thing, and they'll tell somebody over here on Mulberry Street another thing for one reason, because they're afraid to tell them what they really think. Here's my stance. I am pro-choice. I believe that a woman and her doctor and God are the only people that should be making a decision about her body. And this one's personal. This is why I believe it. People laugh at it when I say it, but I'm so honest. Number one, I can't get pregnant. I can't. It's literally impossible. Two, I can't carry a child in my body, nor can I give birth. Therefore, three, as a man, I am not qualified to tell a woman what to do with her body. I do not meet that qualification. Not possible. My opponent thinks differently. You know as well as I know, for decades, there has been an ongoing fight to tell women how to make their own health care decisions. And he has been leading that charge. That's another reason that I'm running for the United States Senate. But I'll stop jabbering because I'm here to listen to you and to take your questions. So I'm happy to do that. Thank y'all for listening to me, explain my platform, and I'm happy to take some questions for you.
All right, questions, comments? Who's first? Yes, Miss Annie.
I'm interested in your position on the transgender conversation.
Miss Annie, I didn't realize that you were going to throw 100-mile-per-hour fastball and out of the gate. But I'm glad you did. I'm glad because it is an important issue. We're all Mississippians and we're all Americans. Here's what I feel. Here's what I believe with regard to transgender students, particularly transgender athletes, because I think that's where people are. Transgender students participating in athletics. We have to do two things. There are three things. One, every student, every child deserves to participate in sports. That is a fact. I don't care if you're transgender, you're a woman, or you're a girl, you're a boy, or you're a transgender child. Everyone deserves to participate in sports. That's a baseline. Two, women deserve to participate on the level playing field. That's not complicated. That's number two. Along with that, transgender students deserve to participate on the level playing field also. Here's what we haven't figured out. Three, we haven't figured out as a society how to make that happen while ensuring that women and girls are not disadvantaged. That's what we have not figured out. We haven't figured out how to do it. And that's what I tell people all the time. It's okay to explain your position and be confident enough in yourself to tell voters, we haven't figured that part out. And as a person, me, Todd Pinkins, I don't know the answer to that. But I do know where we can potentially get the answer from the people that are affected most. Women, girls, transgender students, and coaches. That's where we get the answer from. So my stance is this, to answer your question. Our young ladies, they deserve to participate on the level playing field. Transgender students deserve to participate in sports. Also, we have to make it happen, but we have to work with those groups in order to figure out how we make it happen so everybody can participate. Did that answer your question, ma'am?
Yeah, but, the one big, question is, before all of the attention to, or somebody divide the transgender issues, but the people were participating and going to the restroom before all this came up, and then all of a sudden it becomes an issue.
Yeah. Our politics have turned into a divisive issue. And I tell people all the time, with regard to a child's gender, I trust parents to deal with that. Moms and dads. This is not the first time that a transgender student has existed on this planet. This is something that's transgender people have been around forever, and parents have been taking care of their children forever. It's just when it gets pushed to the spotlight, we use it to divide people. We use it to separate people. I trust parents to make those decisions for their children. And I don't think that politicians should have so much weight with regard to what's happening in people's households. I trust mothers and fathers to do that.
Along those lines, talk a little bit about the divisiveness that we see and your take on it and where we go from here.
Well, I think what we've got is two parties that do the same thing. I think, and I'm a Democrat, and I tell people I consider myself an independently minded Democrat. And let me explain to you why. It's particularly because of the divisiveness that we see. We have one party depending on who has power in DC. If the other party puts forth a policy that benefits you, simply because the other party is on the other side of the aisle, they'll go sit on their hands. Take, for instance, the recent immigration bill, right? Where Democrats put forth a comprehensive immigration bill filled with Republican policies, more funds for border security agents, more funds for immigration judges, strengthening our border. Even they put a point in there where the president had the authority to literally shut the border down. And they did not include Democratic issues like a pathway to citizenship. They left all of that stuff out. Yet the other party, including my opponent, voted against their own ideas. Make that make sense? Does not make sense at all. And so what we've been seeing is on each side of the aisle, depending on who has power in Washington, they'll go sit in the corner and sit on their hands and not vote in line with some of the policies that they supported before. Divisive issues like the LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights, you name it. They use that identity to divide communities and keep them divided each year when each cycle when election comes around. And I think the solution to that is to communicate with each other. There was a point when we had a large percentage of veterans in office. Now, that's less than 1%. And I think you see now the decline in ethics, where you have politicians that will literally come out and tell you something that's not true, and they know it's not true. And as a veteran, I mentioned I served 21 years. As a veteran, this election cycle is personal to me because I really believe that our democracy is at stake. We're standing on a thin line right now. And one of the reasons I'm so adamant about this particular race is because my opponent is also a veteran. He's also a veteran. And what's really, really interesting to me is that we have service members who are serving all around the world. I'm one of them. I served those 3 combat tours. And it wasn't just me going off to war for over 36 months. It was also my family sitting at home while I was off at war. It was the birthdays and the births that were missed. My kids were growing up without me. But I'm not an anomaly. That's happening all over this country where we have service members who have raised their right hands and sworn to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And along with that oath, they've said, I'm going to spend time away from my children to protect this country proudly. So when my opponent embraces someone who literally orchestrated an attack on our democracy, I think something's wrong. And I don't think we get to do that without being challenged. And as a veteran, I think I have the foundation to challenge that. I really do, and I will. And he will get called out on this entire election cycle. You can't, those two things don't balance. You can't say that you love and you support our democracy, but you support someone who is literally trying to be an authoritarian, who has literally said that he will be an authoritarian on day one. You can't do that. No, absolutely not.
Other questions? Patty?
Thank you, Ty, and thanks for all the work you've been doing for the last 2 years leading up to this election season in November. You've been standing your ground, we've been watching, you've been listening, and we've been talking. So here's the thing about education. Our state has already this year has generated $2 billion doing the lottery. And teachers are only getting $600 per year for supplies. That's nothing to do with their income, the gas stipend, or anything to help themselves to stay on the ballot in our classrooms, in our public education classrooms. Traditional public, the charter is not the public, not the traditional public. I'm going with traditional public schools. Why aren't we focused on that with this $2 billion in the money that's already, transportation, has already gotten their chunk. This money is sitting, and our teachers are only getting, the qualified teachers, well, not all of them, are only getting $600 per year, and then they still have to add their money for supplies. Because $600 doesn't go anywhere when it comes to supplies. And another thing, fighting education, one more thing, just fighting this Medicaid extension. Our state legislature now just considered the state-based exchange. Which is the state-based exchange. They're just not considering it. When we gotta add that to the Medicaid process, because I'm not on Medicaid. I pay for my own health insurance. This state-based exchange will give those who pay for their health care themselves a better deal. And that's how they're considered now, even as we fight in our state today. So these are things that I'm worried about that your opponent's not going to bring up. And this is not about poor people, it's about all people. So where are we on this state-based exchange and this lottery? Where is this money? Why are we just sitting and not making sure that that's not added to their salaries?
With regard to education and how it's tied to the lottery and the state-based exchange, it goes back to the same thing. The people that are in charge here in Mississippi, both of those are state-level issues. And it's the same pattern that we see over and over and over again. Why is it so difficult for us to do the simple thing and say that we're going to pay teachers what they are worth? That's not hard. That's weird.
So I guess one thing you can do on the federal level, the teachers, if they don't itemize their taxes, are capped at a $300 reduction on the federal taxes for supplies that are reimbursed. That needs to be raised as well, and that's at a federal level where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's part of the Pay Teachers Act. I think Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren wrote that, and they're trying to push that policy through Congress now, and that's why I support it.
And on the state base, he's with Mr. Federal, that's how I was going to do that as well, because on the state-based exchange, you can have that on federal level, because that's my place.
Yeah.
Our place is us all. So we have to establish this state-based exchange, so we don't keep getting stop in Marketplace. Because you get one thing in Marketplace one year, next year, it's going up to 50 or 60, 70 or 80 more dollars per, you know, it's like a balloon effect on your
Yeah.
mortgage. Okay.
I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. And you talk about Medicaid as well. For me, over 40 states, 50 states, well, no, over 40 states have figured out how to expand Medicaid. 40 states have actually written the roadmap for us. 40. And our leaders can't figure out how to go next door and copy for free that roadmap and bring it here in Mississippi and implement it. So that more people will have access to healthcare, more mothers, more children will have access to that. And so what I will do, as I mentioned earlier, as the next United States Senator of Mississippi, is make sure that the opportunity to expand Medicaid stays on the table until our state leaders get themselves together. You see it already. Last year, we fought tooth and nail with the campaign, yelling about Medicaid expansion. All of a sudden, a Republican lieutenant governor thinks that it's important to expand Medicaid, but they're still fighting back so hard. We want to do Medicaid light. We want to expand Medicaid with these caveats. You got 40 other states that have already done it. It's not. No, you can go to a Republican state and get a plan and implement it here in Mississippi to make sure that an additional 200,000 people have access to health care. It's not that hard. It is not that hard. And my opponent is one of those people that have been fighting against it for years and years. And what we have to do is get out and communicate with voters. And voters have to make a decision. Have to hold them accountable. And a lot of people have said to me, well, Todd, why are you doing this? This is an uphill climb. This is a tough fight. Mississippi is a red state. Why are you doing this? Because somebody's got to do it. Somebody has to get into the fight. You don't sit back and say it's hard and do nothing and think that something is going to change. Everybody doesn't want to run for office. That's fine. That's okay. Some people want to be teachers. That's awesome. I love teachers. Some people want to be lawyers. Some people want to be doctors. Some people want to work in the restaurant business. Everybody does their thing. But somebody has to get into the fight. And somebody has to represent those people. Somebody has to be the voice for those people that don't want to stand in front of the room with people to take questions. There's nothing wrong with not wanting to do that, but somebody has to do it, even though it's an uphill climb. Somebody's got to climb that hill. And the reason I'm so confident in Mississippi, and you all, is because I know what we have. Take Georgia, for example. A few years ago, several years ago, they elected 2 Democrats to the United States Senate. They elected one of them twice in a 6-year time span, Senator Raphael Warnock. Georgia's only 28% African American. Mississippi is the blackest state in this country. Literally, 40%, nearly 40%. You are not going to sit here and tell me that Georgia can elect a Democrat to the United States Senate and our state cannot. I refuse to believe it. I refuse to believe it. I know, and the pushback I get sometimes, well, Georgia's got Atlanta, and it's so, we have Hinds County, we have Jackson, we have the Mississippi Delta, we have DeSoto County. What my responsibility is going into those communities and standing in rooms just like this and explaining to everyday voters where I stand and encouraging them to register and get out and vote. That is my responsibility to do that. And that's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm running for this United States Senate.
I see Heather, and then we'll come back to you, sir. Heather, you go first.
Good morning. Can you talk about your position on historic preservation and how do we save historic Black spaces?
One, we have to respect those spaces enough to make sure that our students and our kids know about it. Right now, we're in this phase, I believe, in this country where we don't appreciate our history enough. We're so afraid about children learning about what we've been through as a state and as a country. We're afraid of our kids understanding what's so special about our state. And in that is our history. Certain parts of it is painful, but that's part of our history and what made us who we are today. It's not something that we should run away from. It's not something that we should shy away from. And it's certainly not something that we should try not to teach our children. And I think making sure that we educate our kids on what they have in our historical spaces, our historical Black colonies, whatever race you want to take a look at, making sure that our children understand what they have is important, and making sure that we preserve those institutions. But when we do that, we also have to make sure that we're investing in them adequately as well, on the federal level and on the state level, but particularly on the federal level, when there's resources available to make sure that we preserve our institutions and educate our communities with regard to what we have in those institutions. I think that's important. That's something that I'll fight for. And I hope I answered your question. I wasn't trying to word out, but I hope I answered. Thank you.
This gentleman here, go ahead, sir.
Yes, and you mentioned that when your program is concerned about the economy. I'm not an economist, I'm a historian, but I did teach history of American economy.
I love history. That's my favorite subject.
And I'm going to give you a head start.
Uh-oh.
I think my question is going to be is about our tax structure.
A tax structure.
Yes, sir. And the fact that today we are $35 trillion in debt, you know that. The interest just on that money is enormous. And yet the politicians do not address it. Now, let me say that in 1950, the corporate tax rate was 50%. Now, I can go through and do it by decade of what happened, but let's just go to 2020. In 2020, the corporate tax rate is 13%. That's what the corporate rate, if they're paying tax. We know Bezos is not paying tax. That is the problem that the Democrats have let get away. Back in 1950, we came out of the New Deal and the Fair Deal. Truman, Democrats, they put the taxes up. Roosevelt said, they hate me. And he said, I welcome their hatred, right? Yeah. No politician is doing that today. And we're 35, my generation is leaving these young people a debt of $35 trillion that's growing every day. And yet the politician says, spend more. And we don't want to bite the bullet and put the taxes where they are because the Democrats are afraid of the Republican response. And that the figures show that. But then what are you going to do to change this philosophy about low taxes for the corporation and the wealthy?
I think that's a great question, and thank you so much for answering. Who here thinks that it makes sense for someone like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg to pay a lower tax rate than a school teacher?
Absolutely not.
It's crazy, but that's where we are. That's where we are today, where you have big corporations that are paying 13% tax rate, and you have teachers, sanitation workers, people that are fixing our roads and bridges paying a higher tax rate than that makes no sense at all. And I think it's something that we have to address, and that's something that I'll fight for in the United States Senate to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share. Everybody.
What's their share?
You talk about back during the Roosevelt era when they were paying 35% tax rate. Well, our economy was better then. We weren't as in debt as we are now. Why not make sure that we force these companies, these organizations, these institutions that are making all this money to pay their fair share and close these loopholes that they found that you, me, and you can't afford a lawyer to find those same loopholes. Close those loopholes, make sure that they're paying their fair share of taxes. And they're also helping to take care of that because for too long, low-income community members, teachers, and nurses have been carrying that load and having to take care of it.
Don't you think the poor should pay taxes too?
They do pay taxes.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
I'm talking about federal tax.
Yes, they do pay their taxes. If you are employed, you have to pay your federal tax. Yes.
But I'm talking about
Pardon?
what if you're not employed?
If you're not employed, what
Well,
do
the
you
capital system is not
resources?
providing employment for everybody.
But, well, people who work, whether they're poor or middle class or wealthy, should pay their fair share of taxes. The operative words here are fair share for the wealthy as well.
Yes, sir?
Where do you stand? Part of the problem with all this, so with the corporations getting, lower tax and whatever, is PACs, super PACs, and Citizens United. If we took away all that garbage, politicians would be bought where they are now. And that's where all this favorable legislation for the corporations come from. Those people could put that money into taxes and other things rather than buying politicians.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the worst things that happened to our electoral process. When they said that corporations are people, when they said that when people can pump in just unlimited amounts of money to politicians, and like I said, buy them. Now, politicians are paying more attention to people and organizations that no one has ever heard of than you. So I think elections should be funded, federally funded, so that politicians have an amount that they get, other than raising from individual Americans, that they can depend on and focus on you, as opposed to being tied to these corporations, whether it be the oil and gas corporations, whether it be the auto industry, whether it be the healthcare industry. Tied to these organizations and having to focus on what they want the politicians to do, as opposed to what you want them to do. That's why I'm proud to say none of them are giving me any money. Our average contribution is about $14. That is it. Everyday Mississippians, everyday Americans donating to our campaign to help me win, which is why I don't have a huge team. So I'm focused on making sure that I focus on you, which is why our campaign model, as you talk, I listen. We do, not on big corporations. So I agree with you 100% that when Citizens United was passed and they opened up the floodgates to money in our politics, we started to go down here. You see now, there are some Senate seats where you're talking about 10, 15, 20, 30, $100 million, depending on the state that you're running in. How that? Does it take that much money to communicate a message to someone? And the other thing that I think is wrong with our politics is they've gotten away from meeting community members where they are. Politicians have figured out that it's easier to buy a television ad, which is necessary in modern politics. Television and radio is necessary, but they've transitioned so much to depending on it, where they've gotten away from meeting people in their yard, on their front door, and saying, "Tell me what's important to you." That's why I'm running across the state, because I think we need to get back to it. There's nothing more heartening than to walk into someone's yard who has said that, has checked out politically, and say, "Hey, my name is Ty Pinkins and I'm running for the United States Senate. Tell me what's important to you." And to see in their eyes that, you know what, somebody is listening to me. And I think that's what we've gotten away from in our politics, and that's part of the reason we are where we are today.
Final comments? Sorry? Final comments?
Final comments. November 5th of this year is general election. I need your support. I'm running on jobs and economy, healthcare, and education. I mentioned I am a veteran, 21 years in the military, 3 combat tours, 2-time lawyer from the Georgetown University Law Center. I need you to donate to my campaign. I need you to tell your neighbors about my campaign. You can go to www.typinkins.com, T-Y, P as in Paul, INKINS.com, and make a contribution. Mississippi, I really believe that we can do this. If I didn't, I wouldn't be doing it. I really believe we can do this. It's a steep climb. It's a tall hill, but I'm climbing it for you. This run that I'm on, this advocacy run, I'm running it for women. I'm running it for healthcare. I'm running it for education. I care about, and I say in my ads, I'm running because I care about my mental and physical health. I'm running this race because I care about your health as well. I need you to support me. Go to typepinkins.com, make a contribution. Thank you all so much for sharing your time with me.
I want to thank everybody for being so attentive and asking very good questions. You know, it's I always take a minute to remind people that our group, our forum, this thing that we do here, is not political. What it is an exchange of ideas, and I think it's very, very